Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast where we explore all things Czech, from history and culture to the issues shaping life in Czech society today. I'm Vít Pohanka, your host, and in this episode we are diving into a debate that highlights both the strengths and challenges of Czech civic society. My guest is Jakub Majer, a Czech businessman and activist who, along with his community, is opposing the Czech government's plan to create a new national park in Křivoklátsko, which is already an officially protected landscape area near Prague. At first glance, it might seem surprising that anyone would oppose the establishment of a national park. After all, while about 1/5 of the land in Czechia is protected in one way or another, the country actually lags behind its neighbors, including Poland and Slovakia, in terms of the proportion of protected areas. It also falls short of the European Union's recommendations. By that measure, more protected areas are clearly needed. However, as Jakub explains, the issue is not the idea of conservation itself, but the way the Czech authorities have approached it.
They are really treating us from the position of power with lack of information, sometimes even manipulation through media, and this is something which I think is not right, and I don't like this, and I don't think we should act like this in a democratic society.
Jakub also highlighted what he sees as an imbalance of power in the Czech nature protection system.
I think that, let's say, the nature protection sector, or I don't know how to call it, they like national parks because in national parks they have the word, they manage them, and they don't need to discuss much with the others like they have to in, for example, the landscape protected areas. And that can also be one motivation because their position there is definitely stronger.
Despite his criticisms, Jakub acknowledges that dialogue with Czech politicians is possible.
I have to say, and this was one of very positive surprises and good news for me, that they are listening. Of course, you have to respect that they can make out of their opinion, maybe with you, maybe against you. But the good message for me is that you really have the chance to speak to them, that if you just send an email and you say, you know, we are the initiative, or the mayor say we are the association, we want to meet you and discuss about this topic, you usually within 14 days, 3 weeks really get the appointment, and you usually meet, you know, open-minded people who listen to you.
In an era of increasingly uncompromising and even spiteful political debates, whether in Czechia, Europe or America, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of the broader picture. This episode of Czechast offers a deeper understanding of how democracy works in Czechia, especially when local communities take a stand against policies they view as government overreach. You will also hear the other side, the Ministry of Environment, that actually proposes the national park, not just Jakub Majer, who fights against it. So, whether you're interested in Czech environmental policy, civic activism, or how citizens engage with government decisions, stay with us for what I hope will be an insightful discussion. You are listening to Czechast, and I'm Vít Pohanka.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Jakub Majer. I'm 48 years old and I work in the pet food business. I run one of the biggest European companies in this sector, And I also live partly at Křivoklátsko, and when I found out in the year 2021, after the election, that the new government put to their program statement establishing of the national park, my journey and relation to this topic and my activity around it started.
We will definitely get to that, but you've mentioned you have a pet food business. I mean, are you producing pet food?
Yes, we are creating, producing and selling products for pets.
And the business is based in Křivoklátsko or in Prague?
No, the business is based in the western edge of Prague originally, but nowadays the group is much bigger and the base is still in the Czech Republic, but we also have several companies across the whole Europe, including production units outside Czech Republic. So we run 9 factories and about 10 distribution companies.
Good business, right?
Yeah, well, we are lucky. It's interesting. We are exporting to 90 countries around the globe, and we are amongst 10 biggest companies in Europe, definitely.
How long did it take you to get to this point with the business, and did you start the business from the scratch?
The business was started from the scratch 30 years ago, but not by me. I joined the company about 17 years ago when it was still relatively small or quite small, and so I participated a lot on the growth from very pioneer ages. When I joined the company, the annual production was equal to this time, like 3-week production. So to give you the idea how much it has grown over the time.
Is it possible to say just roughly how many people you employ?
We employ about 650 people in the Czech Republic and another 350 in other European countries, or altogether a little over 1,000 directly.
That's a respectable number, let me put it like that. But we are here to talk mainly about Křivoklátsko, the region where you live. You know, Czech listeners would probably know where Křivoklátsko is, but this is for people who listen perhaps abroad or who are perhaps not so familiar with the Czech geography. So if you were to explain again to the listeners what kind of region Křivoklátsko is.
Okay, so Křivoklátsko is west of Prague, about 40 to 50 kilometers west of Prague. It is on both banks of Berounka River, which goes from Pilsen to Prague, and it's a big forest. It's a forest which is in, let's say, lower altitudes, because the highest point of Křivoklátsko is around 600 meters above the sea. But it's definitely not flat, it's very hilly. There are very deep valleys created by creeks or small rivers, and of course the canyon of Berounka River. And it's actually one of the biggest forests in Central Europe. And back in the days, in the medieval age, it belonged always to Czech kings, and it was like their region for hunting, and because of that it was also protected. The possibility to build settlements was very limited, because there was this, ownership by the king. But later it has, like in the, let's say, 17th, 18th, 19th century, there was very significant mining activity and iron production, and to that was also relating coal production. So people were burning wood to get
charcoal,
to get charcoal, which was then used as a fuel in the production places, which had very significant effect on the region, because the forests were
Devastated. It was basically deforested.
It was basically absolutely deforested. There are evidences about it, and that later, turned. This is now over. The coal production stopped in the early 90s, and now the region is famous for the forestry. Czechoslovakia is one of the, and I'm sorry for my English, it's part of the model forest net in Europe. So it's very known for its forestry. It's known still as a hunting region because there is a lot of game, and today it's also known as a touristic target, especially in, let's say, summer area or spring, summer, autumn area, not that much over the winter.
Yeah, I witnessed that. I was just going to ask you, because it is kind of so close to Prague, it's very easy to reach, but I didn't remember seeing many foreign tourists. I think it was a lot of Czech people. Is that a wrong impression?
Well, depending when.
Of course, I mean, but if we take Karlštejn, for example, but that's not, strictly speaking, Křivoklátsko, is it?
That's Český Kras. But the name of the region comes from the place called Křivoklát, where was a very famous king's castle, which is there still. And I think this place is exposed and visited also by foreign tourists, not that much the other places which are, let's say, more related to some interesting place in nature, and there it is more visited actually by Czech people, Czech citizens, and not only from Prague, I would say, because we are also close to Kladno, which is quite big population, Pilsen and other settlements.
It's kind of easy to get there, isn't it?
It's kind of easy to get there.
The highway D5
yes,
is quite close.
Well, not only D5, there is also the highway towards Karlovy Vary, so it actually lies between these two highways.
Now, Czech government came up with this proposal to start a national park there, and you don't like it, the idea. You don't think it's a good idea, let me put it like that. Why is that?
I think there are two reasons. It's important to say in the beginning that Křivoklátsko is very unique for its nature, and as such is already protected.
It's a protected landscape area.
It's a protected landscape. It's a protected landscape area since the year 1977, and this is quite strict system of protection. In the Czech Republic we have 26 protected landscape areas, and Křivoklátsko is one of them. So it's important to say that there already is a system of protection, and to my understanding and as I see it, this system of protection is very appropriate for the region like Křivoklátsko, because National Park represents specific approach to the land, which basically is manifested with the system of non-interference. In Czech bezzásahovost. I'm not quite sure about
the Czech term bezzásahovost, non-interference. Basically
no interference is probably the right one.
The forests grow as they grow naturally. You don't do anything about them, even if they are attacked, let's say, by some
bug, even if they are attacked by wind, which is, by the way, very common in Křivoklátsko. Even if it is attacked by fire, you just let it be. And Křivoklátsko, I was saying it already in the beginning, is very known for the forestry and for the, let's say, planting forest. And it's a very traditional profession, traditional job. traditional approach to land, and we are afraid that, and it works on Křivoklátsko very well. And I think that the way how Křivoklátsko looks today, the way how Křivo is today, really justifies that this is a very relevant management. Nobody said what's wrong there, and suddenly out of nowhere came this idea to change it and to make the center part, which actually is in the first and second zone of the protected landscape area, so has the heaviest protection, to change to the national, which actually means totally different way of treatment, approach to nature, and we are afraid that can have rather negative impacts, that it's not really justified, and that it's very robust and not needed. And because it goes hand in hand with pretty robust organization, we are talking about 70 to 100 employees. I also see it as relevant from the cost point of view, and the costs are paid by all of us through taxes. And last but not least, we also think that the national parks are, let's say, big magnets. It's known brand from the marketing point of view, so it will bring there even more people, and in some places and some period of times Křivoklátsko is overcrowded already today. So all of that really puts us to the opposed position. And the other point is the way how the government and, let's say, the officials or authorities act in last 3-4 years, because they are really treating us from the position of power with lack of information, sometimes even manipulation through media, and this is something which I think is not right, and I don't like this, and I don't think we should act like this in a democratic society.
Why do you think they do that? I mean, the government or the authorities that are responsible for establishing such a national park, and why do you think they came up with the idea just now?
Well, it's not brand new. This activity was here also about 12 or 13 years ago. Actually, the first ideas go back to 80s. Our minister, Mr. Hladík, says already communists wanted to establish.
Mr. Hladík is the
Minister of Environment. Yes. So this idea in the let's say nature protection part of the society exists for long. Why they came up with it right now out of nowhere is maybe a question to them, not to me. I can say that it really appeared out of nowhere, and I think that there are political reasons behind that. The people who put it to the program of the coalition Spolu before the election, they really thought it's catchy and that it will bring them some new voters. And I a little bit think that this is one of the motors behind that still. I do not want to speculate about some other alternatives. Plus, I think that, let's say, the nature protection sector, or I don't know how to call it, they like national parks because in national parks they have the word, they manage them, and they don't need to discuss much with the others like they have to in, for example, the national landscape protected areas, and that can also be one motivation because their position there is definitely stronger.
Let me just mention for the listeners, when we talk about the governing coalition Spolu, that translates into English as together, and that's the coalition that has been in government ever since 2021, if I'm correctly, yeah, in October. You are listening to Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Today my guest is Jakub Majer, a businessman and activist who opposes the Czech government's plan to establish a new national park in Křivoklátsko, central Bohemia. I can quite understand that it can be politically, attractive. I mean, to have something like that in your manifesto or platform, as they call it in the United States. But how much of support for the national park do you see in Křivoklátsko itself?
I think I can say the region is quite strictly against it, and I would say that 80% of people there is against. And of course there are some supporters, logically, but they are definitely not the majority, and they are not even a significant minority. And this is not just my feeling, this is based on facts, because...
Did you have a poll or something?
Well, something like that. Basically, there is about, really in the park, with some part of their cataster, is 16 or 18 villages or towns. But let's say in the area around, there is about 15 others, so let's say 35 settlements is somehow connected because they are either in or in the near surroundings, which means that everybody who travels there has to go, through
the area that
or something like that. Or they are really, sometimes you are more influenced if you are right next to the border, etc., etc. So, and out of those 29 are members of Svaz obcí Křivoklátska, so
Association of Communities of Křivoklátsko.
Association of Communities, and they entered this association based on the voting of their representatives, zastupitelstvo, and the strict statement of the association is no to the park. Mm-hmm. That's one point. In almost every village or town, there was some questionnaire going on or some research, and almost everywhere it was really significantly against. We are talking about 70, 80, even 90% against. And plus, when we formulated or wrote down our petition in the year 22, we got over 11,000 signatures, mostly from the region. Not only, but mostly. And if you and then of course you meet people, you talk to people, you see in almost every village a banner against the park, and if you really put all of that together, I think you can say that the significant majority of the region is against this idea.
But I got in touch with you because you kind of represent Otevřené Křivoklátsko. Yes. So how does Otevřené Křivoklátsko, Open Křivoklátsko, this region, cooperate with the Association of the Communities? Yes. And are you also active in the local council somewhere?
Well, I am not a member of the local council in our village, but I cooperate with them, I know them, I visit the meetings, and basically we were 5 founding members of the initiative, the citizen initiative Otevřené Křivoklátsko, Open Křivoklátsko, and actually 2 of us were mayors of
the communities
of some communities, and actually one of them, Mrs. Evita Kohoutová, is also chairman of the association, and now the structures or the pack of active people is changing over the time, and there is even more mayors actively cooperating or participating on the initiative. So we are really in close contact and we work together.
You know, the reason why I got in touch and why I think this is very interesting, I don't see it as a kind of just one local thing in Czechia. I just see it as this kind of continuation of this tendency. You know, it looks very well, I mean, as we mentioned, I mean, even for politicians to say we want a new national park, it kind of looks rosy and yes, we want to protect the area. But the local people, it's not that, this is far from the first case that the local people actually have a problem with that. And I think I mentioned that when we were arranging for this interview. I'm a big fan of the US national parks.
Yes.
And there's been always a struggle when they were starting new national parks in the United States between local interests, farmers, miners, etc. But usually, I mean, they prevailed. But the US national parks are something completely different. So I see also this dimension, whether it makes sense, frankly, I mean, to have a national park, I mean, to call it a national park, so close to Prague, you know, such a heavily populated area. And I suppose my question is, do you get some support from politicians in the parliament? I mean, are they at least listening to you? Mm-hmm. Or are you kind of trying to open closed door in this respect?
I have to say, and this was one of very positive surprises and good news for me, that they are listening and really...
Let me say, who is that? I mean, the ministry, let's say?
The ministry not that much, but, you know, we are trying to meet politicians. Mm-hmm. We are trying to meet members of the parliament, members of the Senate. And the good news is that 90, maybe even 95% of those you ask for a meeting, they really give you the time and you have an appointment with them and you have the chance to, let's say, explain your statement. And of course you have to respect that they can make out of their opinion, maybe with you, maybe against you. But the good message for me is that you really have the chance to speak to them, that if you just send an email and you say, you know, we are the initiative, or the mayor say we are the association, we want to meet you and discuss about this topic, you usually within 14 days, 3 weeks really get the appointment, and you usually meet, you know, open-minded people who listen to you. And that's really good news for me.
And sorry, just one question. Let me insert. Is this across political spectrum?
This is across political spectrum, and of course, like, it's difficult to, you know, or almost impossible to get an appointment with, I don't know, prime minister or minister, because really their agenda is big and our problem is really regional. But even this is possible, I guess, and this is a very good news. And this is what we want, because we want to be heard and we want to have a chance to explain the reasons and our motivations, because we are in a little bit tricky situation, which, by the way, on the other hand, is also, let's say, intellectually challenging, that we are like against, or somebody can say that we are against nature protection, which is not the truth. we are very happy that we are living in the protected area. One of our mottos is that HKO is okay.
Which is the abbreviation for the land protected area.
Yes,
I know.
we are very happy for this, and we are not against nature protection. We are just saying that, like, the system of national park is not appropriate everywhere. And that goes a little bit, I think, to your question, because if you really look at it strictly, but also according to what the Czech law says, then the area for the national park has to fulfill some requests about the number of, let's say, how do you say původní, like indigenous
endemic species? Yeah, endemic species.
No, I'm talking more about ecosystems.
Ecosystems.
You know, because in my eyes, the national parks are here to protect really pieces of the world which hasn't been touched by a man yet, and they are here to, protect them and keep them as they are. And that therefore we as a society, we say, society of men, we say, we will let the nature be, we will not interfere, we will not touch, we will not plant forest, we will not, harvest the wood, we will not hunt, etc., etc. And I think this is very valuable. And there are some international standards called IUCN, and that really makes perfect sense. But we are living in Central Europe. We are living in very populated area of the world. We are living in the area of the world with very, long history of settlement. The nature is exposed to people. There is nothing bad about it. And in my eyes, the national parks, it's a little bit like a game. And yes, it's probably interesting to 5 or 6 or maybe even 7, not only 4, as we say today, or as we have today, but I see it a little bit like artificial. And I understand that there were the reasons in 90s when, for example, National Park Šumava was founded, because, we were right after communism. The environment was really devastated. Actually, one of the first demonstrations were because of the ecological situation here in late 80s.
Yeah, one of the first demonstrations against communism were because of the environment damage that
yes,
the communist
in the northern region. And then, after the switch, after the revolution, I think people were afraid that the wild capitalism will be even worse, and that then it was very relevant to say, okay,
no, we really want to keep that, and let's have this new national park in
for example, Šumava, and later Českosaské Švýcarsko or Podyjí. But this is not the situation today. The environment is improving every year. This is a fact which is justified by the annual reports of the Ministry of Environment. We are really, as a society, I think, understanding that we have to protect the nature around us. We are protecting it. That's why I said that, we have about 26 landscape protected areas in the Czech Republic. And to say that if we take 16% of one of it, turn it to the national park, that we will increase the level of protection, that's a little bit, I think it's populism. And I actually think, last sentence, that if you really want to improve the level of protection, you should start in the places which have no protection at the moment, and not just change
the status
of
landscape protected
one part of the landscape protected area to something else. I actually think this is very bureaucratic thinking, and that's also one of the reasons why we are against it.
I think we touched upon this kind of philosophical question that I also indicated at the beginning that I like the American national parks because they are usually pieces of land that haven't been used, by people, whereas it's very difficult to find such a place here in Europe. And let me just mention that recently I worked on 2 programs actually in Czech about the Czech Switzerland National Park after the fire, because there's a big argument, there's a kind of clash, if I sum it up, of 2 positions. One position is we wanted beautiful national park in the sense, there will be nice trees and everything. So people who want it like that, they say we have to, start planting trees very soon, etc. And then there are the conservationists from the National Park Administration, I have to say, local, who say, no, let's just leave it be, which actually makes sense in the time of environmental change and higher temperatures, because that will allow for the plants and trees that will be able to survive, to grow there. And I don't know which side is winning, but that is what is happening there. It just comes to my mind that we haven't probably, even here in Czechia, solved this kind of basic dilemma. What are national parks for? And that's, I think, what you are hinting at. Does it say anything, you think, about how the state is functioning, how the Czech state is functioning? Your experience?
I think it does, because unfortunately, for example, the national park officials or the officials from the Ministry of Environment, they are pretty much on this conservative part of the X, and they are really taking it to extreme, and that's also why there are clashes and they are running into conflicts, and I think this is not good. They should really listen more, and they should respect that there are also people living there, and that is relevant what they want, you know. And okay, now we have the question like, what should we do with the burned air in České Švýcarsko? But I actually think the more important question or position is like, why it happened, why it burned so badly, and what can we do not to repeat that, you know. When it's already burned to the ground, then, you know, I think both attitudes are relevant. Probably it's better to let it be and monitor what will happen. But this is also one of the strong positions of the national park, and this is this, let's say, scientific position, that actually their interest is to observe and monitor. You know, which is fine for the scientists probably, but this is not always fine for you as a citizen of the region
Who lives there,
because simply you do not want it, maybe, you know, and it burned because there was really a lot of dead wood, you know, which was left there, and this is the non-interference management or attitude, and of course there was many other reasons, like a strong wind, you know, it was like fired by a man, not by a lightning or something like that, but I think it's very typical situation for national park, and I think that the national park does not have much other alternatives than let it be and observe what happens, because this is their purpose.
On the more positive side, again, as you mentioned, politicians are at least listening to you,
yes,
right?
Politicians.
So now there is the bill which will go into Parliament.
Yes.
The kind of the proposal. How do you see your chances?
I would say 60-50.
60-50? 60 difficult to say.
It's very difficult to say, but I will put it another way. You know, when we started, people were giving us something between 10 to 25% chances that we succeed and that we really, you know, win with
that you can influence the process and
our position. Now the politicians are saying to us it's 50-50. Which I translate for me that it's like 60-50, because I want to be optimist. And, you know, there is not much time left for the government, because we have the election coming in October this year, which is like 9 months from today. And there will be a campaign. The process is quite long, from the beginning to, let's say, having the bill as a part of the law code. So it's really open.
You know, preparing for this interview, I just wanted to get some relevant information and comparison of how much land is protected in Czechia,
yes,
as compared to Germany, to
yes,
Austria. Even though Austria is kind of not so typical because they've got the Alps, you know, and it's and I was quite surprised actually to find out. I thought that Czechia had larger proportion of protected landscape areas than, for example, Germany. It's not like that. Czechia has got about 22%. Germany has got more. I can't remember exactly between Austria, whether it's 27%, something like that. And of course, I totally understand that one thing is the official status protected landscape area or other, whatever you call it, and the procedures, what it means actually in practical terms, how it is protected and what it means for the local people. But still, I was a little bit surprised that we are, I don't want to say lagging behind, but that there is a smaller proportion of Czechia protected. Yes. Does that surprise you, or did you know that?
I know it because now, during the process we have really learned a lot about this topic. Because we try to be active in this. It does not surprise me that much. What is, I think, more important to mention is that with establishing of the National Park Křivoklátsko, this count or this percentage will not change, by a single digit, because according to the European law, I can say, there is a demand to protect 30% of
30%, yeah.
30% of 30% of the land area and 10% strictly, So the whole area of Křivoklátsko is already protected by protected landscape, so influence to the 30% is zero. And the protected landscape area is categorized to 4 zones, which are like 1, 2, 3, 4. And the zone 1 and the zone 2 is considered, also according to the European law, as a strictly protected region. And the national park is from, I would say, 97-98% of these first and second zone. So it will not even help Czech Republic to improve in this 10% strict protection. So from this, it's often used by the officials as one of the arguments, but if you really find the European document, if you read it carefully and then you look at the map, it's actually not true.
So says Jakub Majer. To keep Czechast balanced and impartial, I asked the Czech Ministry of Environment for comment. They sent their response via email, and here it is read by my colleague Daniela Lazarová.
The nature of the Křivoklátsko region is unique in the context of the Czech Republic. The future national park is proposed to be designed on 16% of the most valuable natural area of the Křivoklátsko protected landscape area. The proposed target feature of the national park is a large, well-preserved inland complex of mostly deciduous forests of lower altitudes with a large proportion of natural or little affected by human activity ecosystems. Thus, the reason for the establishment of the national park is its high and unprecedented natural value of the area, which is not by any means connected with the factor of distance from Prague. According to the proposal, almost 99% of the area is state-owned, consisting of almost exclusively forest land. At the same time, the ministry has tried to accommodate as many requests and remarks as possible in relation to all affected owners and communities.
But critics like Jakub Majer argue that the current level of protection is sufficient without establishing a national park. So why does the ministry believe that it is still necessary?
It is important to note that the conservation objectives of national parks are substantially different from those in protected landscape areas. For the best preserved part of the Křivoklátsko region, the current nature conservation regime is not sufficient, and its change is necessary, especially in terms of the approach to the management or its absence regarding naturally valuable forest ecosystems. Within the predominant area of a national park, the effects of natural phenomena and processes are, in the long term, given priority over human activities. These objectives can only be effectively achieved through institutional protection connected with legal regime and management instruments of protection defined by law for national parks. Its designation is also accompanied by experts and professional background and material security provided by the establishment of a dedicated national park administration. The national park designation will strengthen the position of municipal and regional representatives in the National Park Council, which plays an important role in approving of key national park policy-related documents. This will give them, as one of the major changes from the current situation in the protected landscape area, an important tool to directly influence what happens in the national park.
So this was the official response from the Czech Ministry of Environment. Well, that's it for this episode of Czechast. A big thank you to Jakub Majer for sharing his perspective and to the Czech Ministry of Environment for providing their response. Next time, we'll switch gears and talk with Jitka Loušková, a good friend of mine, author and professional coach. What I admire most about Jitka is her courage, because she made the bold decision to leave a successful academic career and set out on the uncertain path of freelance writing and coaching. In our conversation, we'll explore what drove her to take this leap, what she has learned along the way, and what insights she has for others considering a major life change here in Czechia or anywhere else in the world. I hope you'll join us for this inspiring discussion. And if you enjoyed this or other episodes of Czechast, please don't forget to like, follow or share. It really helps others discover the show. And if you have comments, ideas or suggestions, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, take care, and as always, naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.